You feel it the moment it shifts. They don't react the same way anymore. You pause before saying things you used to say without thinking. You explain more than you used to. You wait a little longer for their response, and they don't have to do the same. Nothing obvious happened, no big fight, no clear reason, but something changed, and you can feel it in how you show up. Because the moment you start needing them more, the balance is already gone. And once you notice it, you can't unsee it. The way you respond changes first. You start choosing your words more carefully. You soften things that didn't need to be softened. You explain more than you used to just to make sure nothing gets taken the wrong way. And it doesn't feel dramatic. It feels small, controlled, like you're just being aware. But it keeps happening. You start checking how something will land before you say it. You hesitate before bringing things up. You think about timing in a way you never had to before. And at the same time, they don't seem to be doing any of that. They respond when they want. They say things directly. They don't adjust the same way. And that difference starts to stand out, not in a big moment, but in a pattern. You're the one managing the interaction. You're the one smoothing things out before anything even happens. And over time, that changes how the relationship feels. What used to feel natural starts feeling controlled. What used to feel equal starts feeling slightly off. And it's hard to explain because nothing clearly happened, but something did. Because once one person starts adjusting more than the other, the balance isn't just shifting in behavior, it's shifting in control. And that's where the dynamic starts changing, even if neither of you says it out loud. What's actually changing here isn't just behavior, it's how much each of you has to think about the relationship. The more you need it, the more your brain starts working to protect it. You start scanning for problems. You notice tone more. You pay attention to small shifts that wouldn't have mattered before. And that awareness changes how you act. You become more careful, more deliberate, more focused on keeping things stable. But that effort doesn't stay invisible. It shows up in how you speak, how you respond, and how much you adjust. And the other person doesn't feel the same pressure, so they don't have to do any of that. They're not scanning the same way. They're not calculating the same way. So their behavior stays more natural, while yours becomes more controlled. And that difference is where the imbalance starts forming. You don't even notice you're doing it until you realize they're not doing any of it. Because power in a relationship isn't just about what someone does, it's about how much they have to manage themselves to keep the connection intact. And once one person starts managing more than the other, the dynamic isn't equal anymore. It's being held in place by one side more than the other, whether either person realizes it or not. Once that imbalance starts, it doesn't stay small. It grows through repetition. Every time you adjust and they don't, it reinforces the same pattern. You give a little more, you wait a little longer, you explain a little more clearly, and each of those feels small on its own, but together they start stacking, because now the relationship isn't just happening naturally, it's being maintained unevenly. And the more you maintain it, the more you feel responsible for how it goes. You start noticing things sooner, you react earlier, you try to prevent problems before they happen, and that makes your behavior even more controlled. Meanwhile, the other person continues operating without that same pressure. They don't feel the need to adjust as much, so they don't. And that contrast becomes clearer over time, not in one moment, but across many. You start to feel like you're putting in more effort to keep things steady, and they start to feel like they can just exist inside the relationship without thinking about it the same way. And that's where the escalation happens, not through conflict, but through difference. You adjust, they don't, and that difference keeps repeating because once one person is investing more effort into maintaining the connection, the balance isn't just shifting emotionally, it's shifting structurally. And that shift makes every interaction feel slightly uneven, even when nothing is wrong on the surface. As this continues, the roles inside the relationship start changing without being discussed. You become the one who holds it together, the one who keeps things smooth, the one who notices tension early and adjusts before it turns into something bigger. And at first, that can feel like care, like you're just being more aware, more invested, more intentional. But over time, it shifts into something else. Because now you're not just participating in the relationship, you're managing it. And the more you manage it, the less the other person has to. They don't need to think ahead the same way. They don't need to adjust as much. They can be more direct, more relaxed, more themselves. And that difference changes how each of you experiences the relationship. One side becomes more controlled, the other stays more free. And that's where power actually moves, not through dominance or control, but through who has to regulate themselves to keep things stable. Because the person who has to think more, adjust more, and hold more than the other person is already operating from a position of less power. And once that role settles in, it becomes the default way the relationship functions, even if neither of you ever talks about it. After a while, the shift stops feeling like something you're doing and starts feeling like who you are in the relationship. You don't just adjust in moments, you expect yourself to. You assume you'll be the one to smooth things out, to think ahead, to keep things from turning into something bigger. And that expectation changes how you experience everything. You become more aware of how you come across, more careful with how much you ask for. You start questioning whether something is worth bringing up before you even say it. And that hesitation builds. Not because you're unsure of yourself, but because you've learned that the balance isn't equal anymore. So you adapt to it. You make yourself easier to be with, less reactive, less demanding, more controlled. And from the outside, that can look like maturity, like emotional control, like stability. But internally, it feels different. It feels like you're carrying more of the relationship than you used to, like you're responsible for keeping things steady in a way you weren't before. And the more that feeling builds, the more it shapes how you see yourself inside the dynamic, not as an equal participant, but as the one who has to make it work. This is usually where it gets misunderstood. Because what you feel is effort, awareness, and control, it's easy to think you're just being more mature, more patient, more emotionally intelligent, that you're the one keeping things stable, while the other person is just more relaxed. And on the surface, that explanation makes sense, but it hides what's actually happening. Because the difference isn't just in personality, it's in pressure. You're adjusting because you feel something at risk. They're not adjusting because they don't feel that same risk. And that's what creates the gap. Not that one person is better at relationships, but that one person has more to lose, so their behavior changes to protect it. And when you interpret that change as simply being better or trying harder, you miss the reason it started. You start believing the dynamic is normal or even healthy because it's not explosive or chaotic. But underneath that, the balance has already shifted. One person is holding more of the relationship in place than the other, and as long as that goes unnoticed, it keeps reinforcing itself, because you keep adjusting and they don't need to. That's when it stops feeling equal, even if nothing looks wrong. So it doesn't feel like you lost power in a single moment. It feels like something that slowly became normal. You adjusted a little more, you thought a little more, you held back a little more. And over time, that became your role, not because you chose it, but because the situation shaped it. And that's what makes it hard to see, because nothing about it looks extreme. It looks controlled, it looks stable, it even looks like you're doing the right thing. But underneath that, the balance has already shifted. Because power in a relationship isn't about who cares more, it's about who has to regulate themselves to keep it working. And once you're the one thinking, adjusting, and holding it together more than the other person, the dynamic isn't equal anymore. It's being held in place by one side more than the other, whether either person realizes it or not.